So we're going to have a conversation today, and it's really, really timely, but also can be really challenging, which is why we want to have it, because we know that the last few years we don't really have to re-tee up the fact that there's been so much tension, especially within the church and the faith community, as we've navigated some of the craziness of our times, our culture, the politics around pandemic, all those things. So Trayvon, I wanted to get you here, and Lauren, I wanted to get you here because some of the conversations we've had, I think you guys represent some great perspective for the rest of us as far as how have you been navigating. So talk a little bit about, Trayvon, I'll start with you. Talk a little bit about the last couple years as a young person of faith, watching everything, all the noise of social media. What are you doing with that? How are you navigating that? Where have you been frustrated? All those things.
Yeah, these past few years have been very bizarre for me because I'm only 21 years old, so I turned 18 at the 2020 election. So that was my first time voting. So I got really deep into the political world. Yeah, got really let's go change the world because my generation's very, very progressive. And so trying to navigate the noise of social media and the news and what are my friends telling me, what are my parents telling me, how to think, was really difficult because I don't think at that time, at least, I was taking it back to my Bible going, what does my Bible say about this? What does God say about this? So that was really hard. I feel like over these past few years, I've started to feel more convicted about that because I just think my ideology was just getting very far off from what it should be.
And also being formed maybe a little bit at the same time, like the formation. Lauren, you've been around this pattern, and we've had different patterns. This feels a little different, but don't need to state the obvious, but at your age, not my age, at your age, we've navigated different times of this kind of tension.
Right.
Talk about maybe this felt a little different, and you've had some convictions as well as Trayvon around the last few years and where it kind of spiraled you a little bit.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of on the other spectrum from Trayvon, where at the 2020 election I was 54, and so you're right. I've gone through a number of different phases through this, and as a conservative person, it's been unique for me to watch the direction of our country, and even bigger than that, the direction of the church in our country. And as a pastor, it concerns me a lot because my number one priority is to help disciple people. And I don't want to just disciple people that agree with me or people that believe the same as me. I want to disciple everyone. And so the conflict that I've been feeling is, as a person that has conservative values, okay, great, that is what it is. But over that is my relationship with Christ. And over that is my value of Christ.
Do you feel like that ever got out of whack?
To be honest with you, it never got out of whack for me, but it spun me out when I saw other people that I agree with and I like saying things that I didn't agree with and saying things that I didn't like.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. I think from the other side too. I feel like I was hearing people I like or agree with or maybe don't necessarily agree with say things, and that would just set me on fire. I'd hear someone say something from a platform where and that would just really, really frustrate me because I'm like, how do you believe the same thing? How do we have to share the same faith but think so differently about this issue to where I feel like we might be ostracizing each other and creating that space between us. It's so polarizing. So that just I was afraid that stuff would drive me away from the church, to be honest.
And let's talk about that, both of you. Yeah. There's probably been some people, that for their church, they haven't necessarily left their church, but maybe they've left their church because of either too loud of an opinion or not enough opinion inserted. Speak to that a little bit from your guys' perspective as you've either been involved in it or have had to navigate those conversations with people.
Yeah. My family actually left the church because they felt like it was being too quiet. Okay. So it was me becoming an adult now going, do I just follow my parents and stop going to this church because how they feel like they're handling the situation, or do I need to be a man and look at my relationship with Christ and go, what do I need? What do I think about this situation? So there was a lot of tension inside the home there and a lot of growing up for me to do in that place.
As part of the crossing, one of the things we've navigated over the last 2 or 3 years with politics, I call it politics and pandemic, but then there's other things, right? There's racial issues that have emerged, and all of that potentially could be really helpful in the long term to see the gospel move. But I think the church navigating has been tough, and Shane's spoken to this a number of times. But as you've had people that thought we were too quiet, we've had a lot of people who thought we were too quiet as well, but from a different perspective. Is that fair, Lauren?
Yeah, I mean, it's always uncomfortable for you when I see someone walk in the church with a MAGA hat on.
Right.
I'm like, what are you doing? Because, and again, for me, that's putting America over Americans. And I care about Americans. I care about everybody, but I don't put the politics of my country above people. And so, yeah, do people have the right to wear whatever they want? Of course they do, but they know exactly what they're doing when they walk into an environment, flashing so loud the corner of the belief that they have. And really, honestly, when I see that, I kind of feel bad for them because I think they're ringing a bell.
This is a conservative.
Yeah, I'm saying this as a conservative. So here's what sucks for me. I actually agree with some of their policies, but I don't agree with their process. I don't agree with the way they're representing it, and they're not representing me. So, sometimes I'll see someone wear a shirt that says something that isn't provocative to me, but then I think of, my buddy Trayvon. I'm like, what's that going to look like to him? And I care about him, and I care about reaching him. And so I go through this inner turmoil when I see that, because it's challenging also as a faith leader when I have to coach people to go a direction that I actually align with what they're saying, but I don't align with when they're saying it, and I don't align with how they're saying it. And so it's my responsibility to try and coach them in a way that they can have an understanding that when you care about people over politics, when you care about Americans over America, I mean, that's just something that's really kind of rattled me in the last 6 months, and some of the readings and the research that I've done is that I'm not a conservative Christian. I'm a Christian. And that's a moniker that I won't allow people to put on me anymore. And there was a time that I actually, when I would talk to people, I'd say, yeah, I'm a conservative Christian. And I thought about it and I said, no, that's not a label that I embrace. I'm a Christian first. And my values might be conservative, and that's okay. I'm going to still run down the road that I'm going to run down as far as my beliefs. But if I put policy and if I put patriotism over people, then it's just not going to work for me.
It's interesting to me to listen to people talk theologically about how God is in control, and even the Lord's Prayer, right? Your will be done, and
right.
Yet how hard we work to try to have our will be done, or what we assume the Lord's will is. We work really hard on that, right? So again, it's the idea of like, how do we do that? Trayvon, from a frustration standpoint, as you think about that, but also from a win standpoint, you said, I made some decisions as an adult, as a young adult, that I'm going to go in this direction. I would assume at that point you also had to kind of choose your faith even over the people that you may have disagreed with, that you were living your faith out with in community. Is that fair? And still do that every day?
Yes, very much so. And it'll be a constant tension, because like Lauren said, that stuff's not going to change. The way we think about those policies or whatever is never going to change. So it's just like navigating that entire space. And he said something that really just is sticking with me, where he talks about like, that doesn't represent him. What other people are doing that may think the same way don't necessarily represent him. I feel like a lot of times it's easy for me to like bunch them all together, like, oh, you guys all think the same way, you all whatever, and that's not necessarily fair to him. It's not fair to other people. So it's really interesting, especially in the context of the church, like when you walk in and if someone says something on stage you don't like, or if one person next to you is wearing that MAGA hat and you guys are supposed to be worshiping next to each other, it's easy to like just dismiss the whole church or dismiss the whole congregation or dismiss a whole group of people and stuff. So it's just a really interesting tension I feel like I have to figure out how to navigate.
That's the challenge, right? Is that many churches potentially would choose not to navigate it. Mm-hmm. We've chosen to try to navigate it because we believe in what it says on the side of our building. Come as you are. And we've tried to make leadership decisions to do that perfectly, of course not. But try to make the decisions that best position us to reach our community, whatever their political leanings are. Because at the end of the day, all of that's going to be swept aside. We have to believe in order to do that. How have you made the church your home, Lauren, in a new way in this season, having navigated the last few years and the challenges of, is it my home? How is my home going to look? When we talk about the church's home, how is that, I would assume, or maybe how has it been more cemented in your mind after navigating the challenges?
Well, I think if the church represents our culture, which we do believe the church represents our culture, half of the people that walk in there every Sunday are going to believe differently than I do as it relates to policies and procedures for our country. And what I have to realize is everyone that comes in is a child of God and is someone that is seeking a relationship with God at some level. And I don't think this as a pastor, I think this as a Christ follower. I have a desire to be in relationship with them. But I will never be able to be in relationship with half of the people that walk in our church if I put this filter in front of me that you have to agree with me. People don't have to agree with me for me to love them. And the thing is that I think that we have to speak to our own culture. So as a conservative person, it's my responsibility to say to other conservative people, don't wear the MAGA hat to church. Don't wear it because you're going to alienate people. And what's unfortunate, I think sometimes people do that because they know they're going to alienate people, which is just crazy because we're called to disciple people, not alienate people. And if we believe in our faith above our politics or our policies or procedures, if we believe in that, we're not going to do and say and act out things that will alienate people. I never want to alienate the opportunity to share Jesus with someone. And so when I'm in public, when I'm ordering coffee, when I'm hanging out with friends, I'm watching and filtering the words that come out of my mouth so that someday I might have an opportunity to influence them for Christ. That's the thing that drives me more than my conservatism, if I can call that.
About that, that I become all things to
exactly.
all people, right? In the Message paraphrase of that, Eugene Peterson defines it as, I don't immerse myself or take on exactly everything that they are, but I understand how I can best reach them for the gospel, and I play that out in my life.
And Paul says, become all things to all people. But you know what we want people to do in our culture today? Take a stand. You need to take a stand for this. You need to take a stand for that. And no, we need to become all things to all people so we can win them for Christ, so we can point them to Christ. And so that's one of the things there's this book that I read called Not In It to Win It by Andy Stanley I literally read it 3 times in the last 6 months. And it's adjusted my view and my thinking of this topic alone. I'm still kind of the same person, and I still believe the same way I believe, but I look at things a little bit different. I'll say this to you, and we all have to be careful of the media we consume in today's culture. And I was consuming too much conservative media, and after reading that book didn't tell me to stop watching it. I just felt convicted that I need to ingest less of the culture, and I need to focus more on Christ, because that's going to help me love people more. So that's what I got from that, and that helps me have a better experience, and as you said, feel safer at church.
Trayvon, I've heard it said that we're all being discipled by something.
Yeah.
So, when I hear Lauren talk about that, whether it's conservative, progressive, liberal, whatever the noise that we're hearing, we have to be careful that it's actually Jesus that's discipling us, and that's who's speaking into our lives at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's the tension I'm finding myself in now. Like, I don't think I have it figured out, and I'm okay with that. That's something I'm constantly going to be navigating over this next season of my life, especially as I step into adulthood. It's like, what am I consuming? Because right now it is a lot of social media, right? It's a lot of the news, it's a lot of whatever, and I have to be careful with that. I have to put that filter up and be like, you know what, maybe this is enough for today. So yeah, it'll be a constant challenge, but it's one that I'm okay with having as long as I continue to have that foundation in Christ.
Isn't it interesting how we have the same things we need to apply to our lives,
right,
but we're like 35 years apart, and we assumedly have different thought processes.
That's why this conversation is important, and people are even listening to this conversation right now, and some people are going, yes, and some people are pushing back, and they're already typing an email around how they didn't appreciate the conversation. And I just ask people to check themselves even right now in the midst of the conversation, to filter through whatever their perspective may have been or that, and to actually just filter it through, what is God saying to me? What's the Holy Spirit saying to me? From wherever I sit on the spectrum of cultural and social issues right now, because I want to be in alignment with the Holy Spirit first and foremost, in a big way. And we want to be a church that does that as well. One of the things that I think we have to acknowledge is that some of the tension that we've experienced actually comes from a real place. That there are real challenges in our culture. There are real social justice issues. There are real economic issues. All these things are not pretend. And I don't think we would suggest at all that Christians remove themselves from that. So Trayvon, when you think about that, like maybe help us understand some of the frustrations from your perspective as a young man of faith and how you're trying to navigate the frustrations of what you see around you while still maintaining your relationship with Christ.
Yeah. So a big part of that is I'm also interracial, so I'm black and white. So these past 4 or 5 years have been just really, really difficult, especially being in an interracial family, knowing the experiences of my mom, my sister, and now my nephew, who are very much darker than I am, has been really hard. I get very, very frustrated at the world because when I see that hatred, I know that hatred's pointed towards the people that are the closest to me, right? So it's easy for me to then meet that hate with hate. So the challenge has been trying to find, how do you love in the midst of that hate? And that's a lot of where this conviction has been coming from, because it's easy to be like, let's just burn the world down. This all sucks. You're a part of the problem. You're a part of the problem. It just becomes a really hodgepodge of just not unhealthiness. So trying to find that healthy balance of loving in the hate is has been really, really difficult.
Have you been able to, as you love in the midst of the hate, have you also been able to gain any traction? Do you know what I mean? Do you feel okay, I can see some ways forward where the church can contribute to the overall growth of how we navigate through some of these issues that are sin in people's lives? Not
for sure.
Way God would want.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like these kind of conversations have been some of that, those steps for me and for the church, having these open conversations and exposing those open conversations to other people. And then even in my own personal life, my girlfriend and her family are they think very differently than me, and that's been a whole challenge in and of itself. And I've seen a lot of growth there, and God do a lot in me there, right? Because I care about these people deeply, and so it's how do I love them even though they think very differently than me.
Trying to understand them as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Don't you think that people are a potpourri? I mean, maybe that's an old school term, but it feels like I think we do slot people into certain things, and I'm conservative, I'm liberal, but I think when I start to really talk to people and pour a cup of coffee, there are things that are sort of cemented in those different spaces, but I think there starts to be some peppering of different ways that people think about things, even though they may kind of position themselves in a certain way. You find that to be true? Yeah,
for sure.
How do we get there, though? How do we discover those things?
I don't really know. I don't feel like I have the answers. That's something I'm trying to figure out too. But I definitely think it comes back to just being in the Word and having these conversations. All of that really just comes back to those two things, and that's something I challenge myself on.
I think that one of the things, Trayvon just shared some very personal experiences. And as a person on a different spectrum of him from both an age and a racial makeup, he doesn't need me when something like that happens to come up to him and apologize. He's not looking for me to apologize to him. What he needs me to do is he needs me to, in the world that I'm in, understand, listen, and empathize. I think, right?
Yeah. No, for sure.
It's just don't come up and apologize, because I have nothing to apologize for, and he's not upset with me. But if I understand who he is, if I care for him, and if I'm willing to listen to him and learn, I think that that's the win in that, for people like me to not feel guilty or uncomfortable when something like that happens. And I definitely don't hold it against him and him not me. But if you aren't creating an environment where you can have a healthy conversation, then you're nowhere near a landing point.
Yeah.
And so that's the whole thing with loving people over policies and procedures and everything. You wash all that out and you see people as people.
Obviously, Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. Right? We've talked a lot at the Crossing around this next season of trying to figure out how do we reimagine what loving your neighbor looks like in this new culture. But I think there's a place for empathy as well, which I think goes even deeper than love. I can love somebody, but when I empathize with them, it's as best I can, I walk in their shoes to some degree, right? So even though you guys are on different spectrums in many different ways, but to be able to at least have some empathy. Right. And I think sometimes it doesn't work even both ways, right? And so I'm just giving editorial comments on all these things. We're going to talk about, Trayvon's experienced some frustration with things. Obviously, middle-aged, white guy, conservative, Christian, frustrations.
One thing that I'm experiencing, I'm going to say this is a new experience in the last few years, is by simply having this conversation with you, I run the risk of being canceled. Like, think about that for a second. And
whichever
you know what I mean?
doesn't like what you say.
Yeah, whoever doesn't like what I say or the way I say it. And that's just not the way Jesus operated. He didn't walk around canceling people. He walked around loving people, and he hung out with people that weren't like him. And so I think that our culture has gotten to a really weird place now, where people who have good things to say and good things to do won't say it and won't do it because they fear. They fear being canceled. And the thing that I'm experiencing is maybe what people experienced pre-cancel culture just in life. Is that fair to say? Where I'm now experiencing that on the other end, and there's this just interesting dichotomy for me. So I don't think I'm going to be canceled because of what I said today, because I haven't said anything wrong. But it's a tension that people walk around with, and we're also afraid of what we say and what we do, that someone's going to come in and they're going to cancel you. You're done. And I don't know what to do with that, really, honestly, because it's just an interesting tension that I navigate when I talk about being, people want to talk about being their true self. Okay, so when I talk about being my true self, that shouldn't be the impetus for canceling someone. When they talk about their true self, that should be an open door to have a conversation, to learn and to grow and to help people. And I think we need to get back to a little bit more of that, where there's a redemption conversation rather than a reduction conversation. How do I help people grow instead of just wiping them out? Because there are people that got wiped out that should be wiped out. I understand that. I get it. But there are some well-meaning people that maybe they make a mistake, or maybe they're ignorant. But why stamp out ignorance? Why not take ignorance and say, how can you learn and grow in this? And just have a redeeming heart. I mean, that's what Christ had for us, is a redeeming heart, and that's what I think we should have with people. If we're trying to be like Christ, we should have that.
And the church is a place that we want that to be true. The idea that the church exists so that, we read, I think we've read this for a long time in different passages, Jew or Greek, man and women, all this, and we kind of blow through it when we read it in the New Testament. We read the words of Jesus, the words of Paul. But I think we're in a new time where those are more meaningful, right? You can substitute other words that you would like. Church, it's home. It's where I go, and we gather and we mobilize together to change our community, both spiritually and physically. How would you encourage somebody to continue to stay?
Well, when you think of the term home, I think of the garage door that opens. I pull my truck in, I close the garage door, and I walk in the door into my kitchen. And I, as a husband and as a father, I set the tone of my home when I come in. And my home is a safe place. It's a place that I can relax. It's a place that I can grow. That's a place for me. And I think equating that to the church, that's what the church should be. And let's remember, the church isn't the building. The church is all of us. The three of us sitting right here, we're the church. And so the conversations that we have should be representing Christ. And so I think when we gather together, it needs to be a place that we gather that's safe. It needs to be a place that we shed all these outward emotions and outward things that maybe during the week we were chirping about, and we focus on why we're together. And we're not together to look and to judge other people. That's not what we're there for. We're there to worship Christ. And I'm right next to Trayvon worshiping Christ. And I don't care what his beliefs are. I just care about him.
So Trayvon, I'm 22. Why do I stay?
Why do you stay? I feel like that is a question that I don't even know if I know how to answer fully. I can do is just encourage to keep trying. I feel like that's the thing. Sometimes it's easy just to give up when things get hard. just keep trying. Find that community. Find those people you can have those conversations with, and just push yourself to grow and just keep putting your faith in Christ, and know that no matter what, He's going to handle this whole situation for you. He's going to give you that community, and He's ultimately going to let you grow and other people grow around you. So
good. And church is like family, right? Sometimes you better be with your family than be homeless.
No, yeah.
Right. And so even if you feel homeless in some degrees, I've shared that with people. So, I've felt sort of politically homeless for a long time, as far as I don't really even know where I fit. But I don't want to feel that when I walk into a church community or a gathering or all of those things. And I think it's true, you guys. I mean, the church, we think of the church as an entity, as a space, but it really is, it's us.
Yep.
Right? So when people criticize the church, fairly so in a lot of ways, it's needed, but it's also really a critique of themselves.
Correct.
Where are you operating in a way that's actually better than the way that the church is operating? Because it's only going to be as good as the people that are in it. So it's a great conversation to have, and I hope other people will have it as well. Appreciate you guys being able to share with us.